Market. What is the market? It is the local space, and it can be a real physical space or it can be a virtual space where competitors sell products to customers. Previously, we had discussed industry. The market is usually a much smaller, localized area where you compete directly with your direct competitors. So whereas an industry can be on a nationwide or even worldwide geographic area, a market is typically much smaller. It's helpful to define your market by imagining a boundary or a border around your market. This is really easy to do in a physical market where you actually can walk around and shop and you can see customers walking around and shopping. So for example, a farmer's market might literally have a fence around the farmer's market where all the retailers that are competing against each other set up their shop and customers walk around freely in the market to buy and shop for their products that they'd like to buy. A restaurant is a little bit more difficult because there's no physical border or boundary around it, but you would imagine that customers that are going to go to a restaurant, there's probably a legitimate amount of distance that they would drive or walk in order to shop around. So for example, if I live in a neighborhood and I was considering going out for dinner, I might talk with my wife and I would say, where would we go? And we would go, well, I don't want to drive more than 5 miles. So that's literally the market that I would be considering. Customers like me, there is not a physical boundary, but there's probably a realistic boundary where once you go too far, those customers are not going to want to drive to go to a competitor. So if there's a better opportunity or a better restaurant 50 miles away, for example, I might drive there, but probably not. I might go to a restaurant that doesn't have as good a quality or doesn't have the experience that I want because it's just too far for me to drive. So there's this more of an imaginary boundary around a restaurant. Internet businesses are the hardest to define a boundary around because they are not bound by driving. It doesn't take any longer for you, anyway, to look at a website from a European company versus a US company. It seems pretty instantaneous to us from our perspective. So how do we define a boundary around an internet business? What market do we play into if we're selling things online? So this is where typically regulations of your country or state might come into play. So it might become very, very difficult for you to sell. If you're an American company, you might have to deal with tariffs, you might have to deal with customs, you might have to deal with extra shipping to ship to another country. So you might just say that I'm going to create this imaginary boundary around a country or a state, and you're going to say, I'm just going to define my boundary for my internet business as the U.S. market. Okay, so again, it helps to create a boundary to help you identify your market, but you want to create a realistic one because for small business owners, there's only so much they can do to study their local competitors. There's also so much that they can do to market or advertise to their customers. So the bigger boundary you make around it, the more effort you're going to have to do to advertise and communicate and compete. So oftentimes you want to pick a manageable market for you to launch your business in. So within a market, there's always local competitors, local customers, and the target market. The target market are your most ideal customers, and we'll get to that more in a bit.